Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I'm showing you guys how I edit my Instagram photos. I did one of these about a year ago, I think maybe longer, but I was asked if I would do an updated one, so I'm happy to share that with you guys. Before I get into the video, I wanted to let you know I did an interview with lore.com. They asked me a bunch of questions about why I do YouTube and a little more about my personal life. So if you guys are interested, I will have a link in my description box as soon as it goes live. It's going live on Monday, if I haven't said that. And then I will have a link in my Instagram bio as well. So if you're not following me on Instagram, please follow me there. And with that being said, I'm just going to jump right in and get started. So I'm going to get started by showing you guys my Instagram feed. It's really white with pops of color. That's definitely what I'm going for. And I also like to vary the depths. So some photos are up close, some photos are far away. So as far as the editing process goes, I really don't like to use a ton of different apps. I feel like it's way too time consuming that way. So the one that I like to use the most is Facetune. And that is because I have a white background on a lot of my photos. Facetune allows you to whiten backgrounds really easily. I mean, it has to be like a pretty white background already. It can't be like a red background and then you make it white. I thought I would start out by showing you guys an original photo and then one that I've posted on Instagram already and how I got to that point. So this photo I posted yesterday, I believe. That is the original photo. And then here is the photo once it's done edited. Super bright and white, so as you can see, it's very, very different. And I also like to play with the focus of different things. So the flowers I put in focus and like the symbol on my shoes I put in focus. But I think if you put some things more in focus than other things, then it just has a lot of dimension to it, and I think it looks really nice. So I'm going to start with the original version in Facetune and show you guys how I got to that point start to finish. So sometimes when you select a photo from Facetune, it asks if you would like to use the recommended size or the maximum size. I always like to use the maximum size, so I'm just going to open the photo. And then the first thing I like doing is the whiten tool, and it has a toothbrush. It's for like whitening your teeth. And I like to do that on the entire background of my photo. Some photos only whiten a little bit, some of them whiten a lot. It really depends on what you're whitening. So when you're whitening around something that isn't white, I really recommend like really zooming in, because if you don't and it's really messy, sometimes it's obvious. So I always like to zoom in around like shoelaces and my leggings, obviously. I also want to let you guys know how hard you push is like how white it gets. If you push really hard, it gets whiter faster, and sometimes it's really hard for you to blend it out when it's pushed really hard. So I always just push down like really lightly at first so I can see how white it gets. So obviously the background is still pretty gray. It definitely isn't white like I want. So once the background is as white as I can get it with a toothbrush, I'm going to go into the tones and I'm going to select a color that is pretty white, not completely white, but really close. And then I'm just going to lightly push on the cement again. And as you guys can see, it gets way brighter. So that is a huge tip I have for you guys. If you have a background that isn't that white, just first whiten it and then start with the tones, and it's so much whiter. So when I get really close to certain things that aren't white, again, I like to really zoom in, because if you don't, it is pretty obvious. So really zooming in will help you out a lot. It's just so much easier, I think. One of the things with tones that you have to be really careful about is it's hard to select the same tone again. So I don't like to push OK until I'm done with everything, because it's hard to find the same shade again. And then really zooming in around my pants and my shoes. So the next thing I like to do is play with my details. Some things I like a little more in focus than others. I just think the photo is way more interesting that way. If it's a full body shot, it's probably like my shoes or part of my hair, my bag, what's on my wrist, things like that. But I wouldn't do everything in focus, or else it's all sort of as flat as it was in the first place, if that sort of makes sense. So I'm just going to tap on the flowers, and I'm going to tap on my shoes as well. Put those a little more in focus than everything else. It almost has like a little more of a 3D effect, I guess I would say. Something else I will do is push OK, and then I like to go back in with the same thing and then do it again. And as you can see, things are a little more in focus that I'm tapping on. That's a little tip I have for you guys, is just push OK and then start again, and it sort of like works a little stronger. So I always like doing that. The next thing I like to do is go into Instagram, and I really like to use the filters in Instagram as well as like, you know, saturation and contrast, highlights, all of that in the app. So the first thing I'm going to do is put on my filter. Clarendon is the one I like to use. I think it's the first one. And then I like to do it typically like in the 30s or really low 40s is what I always use it on. And then the next thing I like to change is the brightness. I like all of my photos really bright. I also like to bump up the contrast just a little bit, nothing too intense. And then I always like to add a little warmth into my photos. I also like to bump up the saturation just a little bit. Highlights is also one I like to use. It's sort of like when you brighten a photo, but it's a little more intense. So sometimes it starts to get a little faded, and I really don't like faded photos anymore. So I really won't play with highlight too much. Sometimes I will have to turn down the brightness so I can turn up the highlights. So with those, it's very similar, so I just kind of have to play back and forth with those sometimes. One of the things I really don't like to use is shadows, because I feel like it sort of has a faded effect, and I really don't want any fade on my photo, so shadows is one that I definitely skip. And then the last thing I like to do is sharpen, and I typically will sharpen somewhere in the 20s. If it's any higher than that, I feel like it's a little too fake looking. Again, I really don't want my photos to seem like they are super messed around with and edited. And that is my final photo. That's what it looks like as soon as I post it, and that's pretty much what I do. If I'm doing a selfie, it's very similar, just whitening the background, starting with the whitener, then going in with the tones if I need to. And I think the most important thing for me is just the brightness. I want really bright photos all the time, and just my contrast in terms of depth. So I think it's important to vary your photos. One thing I do want to mention though before I end this video is VSCO. You can add photos here before you post it on Instagram to see if it will fit with your walls. So I really like that. It's something I just started recently, and since I like to edit in Instagram, I will just screenshot it there, and then when it's in my photos, I like to put the square back on, so that way I don't have like the entire screen of right before you post on Instagram with like the text box and all of that. And then I add it into this app so I can see just how it will look once it's posted. That's really popular, and that way I don't have to worry about like posting something and then erasing it if I don't think it fits. So that's something I definitely recommend if you guys are sort of unsure with your photos and you just want to see what it's going to look like before you post it. That app is also free, and I think Facetune is $1 if you guys are wondering. So yeah, that's pretty much everything for this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please thumbs up this video. Make sure that you are subscribed to my channel if you haven't already. I post on Tuesdays and Fridays, and I would love to have you stick around. So thank you again for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!